Hello, I hope you find this story interesting. Your feedback, suggestions, and subscriptions are always welcome. Losing a loved one changes everything. You wake up in the morning and reach for the empty space next to you. You hear a voice that is no longer there. You live, but every moment reminds you that someone important is gone forever. Grace thought it was the worst thing that could have happened to her. But she did know about the betrayal that lay ahead. Grace had been married to John for 42 years. He was her support, her friend, her universe. When he died, the house became empty and cold. Her children tried to support her. "Hey, Mom, why don't you come stay with me for a few days?" Her daughter suggested. Grace did not want to leave, but she agreed. She needed time to collect her thoughts. She did not realize that someone would use this time against her. Her family said the right things. "You need to rest, Mom. We are always here for you." But something was wrong with their voices. Grace didn't pay attention. She was too devastated to notice the details. She thought she had a family. But when she got home, she would realize the terrible truth. Grace was sure that her family supported her. She thought they understood how hard it is to lose someone you've lived with your whole life. But when she returned home, she realized not all tears are sincere, and not all promises mean care. Grace opened the door. The house was quiet, but it wasn't just any quiet. Something was not right. She took a few steps forward. Her hand automatically reached for the table where John's book always lay. But there was no book. She took off her coat and walked into the living room. John's glasses, which he always left on the shelf, were gone. His favorite chair looked empty. There was no newspaper, no small items that had been there a week ago. Grace's heart began to race. Maybe I just forgot I put them somewhere else. She went into the bedroom. That's when she got a real shock. The closet was half empty. John's clothes, suits, shirts, even his favorite sweater were gone. His watch, which she had bought him for their anniversary, was no longer on the nightstand. And the collection of vintage cufflinks he had collected all his life was simply gone. Grace felt her hands shaking. What had happened? Who did this? She ran to the phone. "Stephen, do you know what happened to Dad's things?" Athi's son was silent for a few seconds, and then he answered with something that left her speechless. "Mom, you don't have to worry about that." But Grace had never been so worried. Grace hadn't yet gotten over the loss of her husband. But now she was dealing with pure betrayal, and worst of all, those she trusted most had already made their choice. "What do you mean? Don't worry." Grace's voice was shaking. On the other end of the phone, her son Stephen sighed. "Mom, it must have been painful for you to watch all those things." "What did you do?" We sold them." The world blurred before Grace's eyes. "What?" "Mama, you said you didn't know what to do with them. Those were your father's things." "Mom, he's not coming back." Grace felt her heart break a second time. She sank down heavily on the bed. They had sold everything. Without her permission. Without her consent. Do you even realize what you've done? Her voice broke. It's just stuff, Mom. We used the money to good effect. For the benefit of whom? Now Stephen was silent, and she understood they had never been truly hurt. Grace stood up. She couldn't breathe. Her own family had robbed her. For money. And that meant only one thing. If they did it once, they weren't going to stop. What else had they taken behind her back? And did she have anything real left? Grace thought her children wanted to support her in her grief. She believed that they were there for her out of love, not profit. But the truth was different, and now she needed to find out who had betrayed her. After talking to Stephen, Grace decided to talk to others. She called her daughter Laura. Or is it true? What are you talking about, Mom? Did you sell my father's things behind my back? Laura was silent. They told me it was your idea. No, it was. It was Stephen and Uncle Henry. Grace felt her body flush with anger. And a Henry. He said it was the best thing to do. Grace couldn't believe it. Her own brother. The one who had always said he supported her. The one who sat next to her at the funeral and said, "We'll get through this together." And then he just took and sold everything that was important to her. She dialed his number. Henry, tell me the truth. What are you talking about, sister? Did you organize this? Pause. Well, and I just helped sort through John's stuff. Oh, you did. Look, you couldn't handle it anyway. We thought it would be best to turn it into cash. We. Laura. Stephen. Grace sighed. Is that what you call it? Turn it into money. Her own family had decided that her grief was a good time to make money. But the question was different. What else are they hiding? The pain of the loss had not yet subsided. But now another blow was added to it. The betrayal of those closest to her. Grace had always thought that family were the ones who would protect you in the darkest of times. But it turned out that for them, her grief was just an opportunity. Grace didn't want to talk to Henry anymore, but he came to her house. Sister, I understand that you are upset. Upset? You sold John's things while I was crying for him. Henry sighed and shrugged. It was a practical move. Practical? We were thinking of you, Grace. You can't live with old things and memories. And so you decided to just get rid of everything. She expected to hear I'm sorry, that they would realize their mistake. But neither Stephen, Laura, nor Henry even tried to apologize. They sincerely believed they had done the right thing. You have to move on, Mom, Stephen said. Move on. Move on where? You have thrown my life away. Laura folded her arms across her chest. It's just stuff. Grace looked at her as if she were seeing her for the first time. Just stuff. To them, it was junk. For her, it was the last thing left of her beloved husband. Grace slowly sat down in a chair. She was no longer outraged by the money. She realized the main thing. They don't understand her. They don't want to understand. They didn't care. And they only wanted money. And that hurt more than anything else. What do you do when your enemies are your own family? And did Grace have anything left that they hadn't already sold? Some things can't be bought. You can't turn back time. You can't make people feel guilty. But what if there is a chance to get back at least some of what was lost? Grace decided to fight. She knew that her family would not help her. So she acted on her own. First, she started checking online platforms. eBay, Craigslist, local Facebook groups. She typed in the names of John's things, and there it was, his silver watch. She immediately wrote to the seller. Hello, sir. This is my late husband's watch. I want to buy it back. A few minutes later, she received a reply, I'm sorry, but it's already sold. Grace's heart sank. She didn't have time. But she didn't give up. She found other ads, other sellers. Nonna, she wrote, asked, offered double the price. Some just ignored her. Some responded, sorry, I can't return it. She was losing her last hope. When she almost gave up, she received a message. And I bought a vintage jacket at an auction. If it's really your husband's, I'm willing to return it for the same amount. Grace clutched the phone in her hands. This was a chance. But was this just the beginning of her search? And was she ready to see what else had been sold behind her back? Grace thought she'd seen the worst of it. But betrayal never happens just once. When a person does it once, they do it again. And this time she finds out something even worse. When Grace returned home from a meeting with the customer who returned John's jacket, she felt unexplainably anxious. She opened the closet where she kept her most valuable possessions. Just last week, it was filled with her family jewelry that had been passed down from mother to daughter. Now it was empty. Grace immediately called Stephen. "Did you take my stuff too?" "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about." My bracelets, my earrings, my locket." "Where are they? Pause. Maybe you just don't remember where you put them." Grace almost threw the phone against the wall. "They're lying again." She opened the internet again. Just like last time, she typed in antique gold jewelry. And within a minute she saw them, her earrings, her bracelet, her family chain. The seller, the same account that sold John's stuff. Grace felt a chill go through her body. They weren't just selling her husband's memory. They were taking her life apart piece by piece. And if she didn't stop them now, what would they take next? When you are betrayed once, you can still forgive. When you are betrayed twice, you start to doubt. But when it becomes a habit, the only thing left to do is to cut all ties. Grace made her choice. Grace gathered all her anger, pain, and fatigue into one phone call. She dialed Laura. "You know what happened to my jewelry, right?" Laura was silent. "Where are they?" "Mom, let's talk calmly." Calmly. "Oh, you sold my husband's things and now you've taken mine." "It wasn't me, but you knew." "It was Uncle Henry," Laura finally admitted. Grace clenched her fists. She knew he was involved. But this time, she wasn't going to stay quiet. She arrived at his house. Henry opened the door. "Grace, it's about time you." "That's enough." He froze. "Where are my things? You know that. Don't make excuses. Give me everything you haven't already sold." He threw up his hands. It doesn't matter, sister." "It matters to me." He smiled. "You've never been practical, and you've never been family." Grace turned and walked away. She no longer had a brother. No more son. She had no daughter. But she knew now, it is better to be alone than to live among those who betray. She cut them out of her life. But did this mean she would finally find peace? Grace gave up on the people who betrayed her. But she couldn't give up the memories they had taken away. She had one chance to get back at least a part of her past. The question was, is it too late? She didn't know where her things had gone. But the world is different now. And everything is sold online. Grace opened her phone and started looking for auctions, and there it was. Her mother's gold necklace. It was being sold for 3 times the price it was actually worth. She felt her heart clench. This was her last chance to get something back. Grace wrote to the seller. "This is a family heirloom. I want it back." The answer came almost immediately. "I'm sorry, but the item already has a potential buyer." She panicked. "I'll pay more. Tell me how much." The seller paused. $5,000. Grace held her breath. That was her entire life savings. Could she lose that too? She opened an account and transferred the money. The seller sent an address for a meeting. But what if it was a trap? What if she just lost the last of it? But she decided to take the risk. She had one last chance, but will she get her item back? Or will she lose everything again? When you are betrayed by those you love the most, it changes you forever. Grace lost her husband, and then she lost her family, who stole from her in the most difficult moment of her life. But what if those who hurt her want to come back? Can they be forgiven? 2 weeks passed or Grace cut off contact with her family. She didn't want to hear from Stephen, Laura, or Henry anymore. But the phone rang again. It was Stephen. She looked at the screen and wanted to ignore it. But then she picked up the phone. "What do you want?" His voice was quieter than usual. "Mom, I wanted to apologize." "Apologize." Grace laughed. "It's bitter." We did a bad thing. I understand." "You didn't just do wrong. You betrayed me." Stephen didn't say anything. Do you want me to forgive you? I just want to talk. Grace clutched the phone in her hand. She had been waiting for those words, but now they sounded like an empty sound. Mom, I made a mistake. You're not the only one. Laura wants to talk to you too. And Henry. Stephen sighed. Henry. No. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong. Grace closed her eyes. She knew this was coming. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said at last. I understand. But give us a chance. They want to come back into her life. But will she be able to trust them again? Sometimes we think we know our family members, but the true nature of people is revealed when money comes into play. Grace has lost her husband. She lost trust in her children. But does this mean she has lost everything? Grace stood by the window, holding her phone. She could have answered Laura's message. She could have agreed to meet with Stephen. She could have pretended that she could forget it all. But she knew the truth. They were not sorry for what they had done. They were only sorry because they had lost control of her. At first she was afraid of loneliness. But now she realizing it is better to be alone than to live among traitors. She started from scratch. She stopped waiting for calls. She stopped hoping that they would change. And she found peace. Is it possible to erase a family forever? Or maybe one day one of them would change and knock on her door. Grace did not know the answer. But she knew one thing now. She would not anyone else take advantage of her pain. Would you forgive someone like that? Would you cut them out of your life forever? What would you do if you were Grace? Is it possible to forgive such a betrayal? Write in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.